Nintendo consoles were the cream of the crop back in the day due to their incredible library of games. That being said, there have been plenty of Nintendo games that didn't end up on store shelves, whether it's due to an insufficient budget, the sudden change in leadership, or something completely out of the developer's control. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with the gamer, and ring that bell to become part of our notification squad so you never miss a video. Sweet! Without further ado, here are 10 canceled Nintendo games you'll never get to play. So sorry. Donkey Kong Racing. Donkey Kong Racing was first announced at E3 2001 for the Nintendo GameCube. It was a smart move by developer Rare to release a racing game for the console before Mario Kart Double Dash hit store shelves. Surely, GameCube gamers in desperate need of an arcade-style racing game featuring their favorite Donkey Kong characters would flock to this game. But suddenly, everything changed. In 2002, Rare was purchased by Microsoft, which caused the company to lose the rights to the Donkey Kong franchise characters before the game was completed. Ouch! After the buyout, the game was heavily reworked into Saberman Stampede, set for release on the Xbox 360, but this game also ended up getting cancelled. Sometimes it's just not meant to be. Super Kid Icarus. Kid Icarus was a very popular NES game back in the day, and while it received mixed reviews at the time of release, the game lives on today as a cult classic. In case you didn't know, this is the game where Pit made his debut, but we're sure you hardcore gamers already knew that. No, you didn't. Typically, if the first installment of a new franchise is successful, you make a sequel. That's how life works. That's why it came as no surprise to anyone why Nintendo announced they were developing a sequel to Kid Icarus, known as Super Kid Icarus, for the SNES. They asked fans to wait for more news, but we're still waiting today. The news simply never came. Instead, a fan game with the same title was created, but it essentially is a 16-bit remake of the original. Cheetahmen II. The Cheetahmen franchise had a very promising beginning, but a bitterly disappointing end. The original Cheetahmen got their start as a minigame on Action 52 for the NES, a game consisting of 52 minigames that were unlicensed by Nintendo. Action 52 even came with a 12-page comic book describing the backstory of the Cheetahmen. It was essentially the best out of the 52 minigames, but it left gamers wanting more. Developer Action Enterprises began working on a sequel titled Cheetahmen II for the NES until they quickly realized the game was absolutely awful. After finishing 6 out of the 10 levels, the developers decided to scrap the project completely. The game lives on in infamy today as one of the worst games of all time, and hackers have found a way to put these 6 levels on a cartridge that has become a popular collector's item, fetching over $1,000 on the market. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Dwagons. The 16-bit era is often referred to as the golden age of gaming, due to the hundreds of classics that were released during that time. Some 16-bit games were very innovative, pushed the envelope, and were clear improvements over their 8-bit counterparts, while other 16-bit games were just 8-bit games in 16-bit form. Dwagons would have been a maze puzzle game released for the Super Nintendo. The game promised adventure, strategy, and arcade-style gameplay with themed levels, co-op multiplayer, and multi-layered puzzles, all wrapped up in a medieval fantasy setting. We were promised innovation, variety, and replay value beyond belief, but all we ended up with was a canceled game. Pilotwings 2. The original Pilotwings was developed by Nintendo and was one of the first games to be released on the Super Nintendo, quickly becoming a cult classic. The game sold over 1.4 million copies worldwide, and Nintendo quickly got to work on the sequel. Unoriginally titled Pilotwings 2. So creative. Everything was going well until they decided to scrap the project to work on a fully 3D version of the sequel for the Nintendo 64. Now, there were rumors that Pilotwings 2 was never in development for the SNES, but those rumors were put to rest when Dylan Cuthbert confirmed they were experimenting with the FX Chip 2 found in the Super Nintendo. No doubt this game would have made big bucks if it was ever completed. Project Cairo. If you owned a Nintendo 64 at some point, you remember all the hype around the 64DD, a disc-based peripheral that promised plenty of features, including network capabilities, an internet clock, expanded storage, and the ability to play new disc-based games. Now, it was a humongous failure, releasing over 10 pieces of software and never seeing the light of day outside of Japan. Many 64DD games were scrapped and ported onto Nintendo 64 cartridges, but not all of them were. Project Cairo was supposed to be a revolutionary game. The game promised a fresh take on the RPG genre and was supposed to be based on a popular 90s fantasy comic book. Hell, the developers said it could have even rivaled Final Fantasy VII, but the game never got past the planning phase. Not much of a rival, in my opinion. Chronicles of Eden Volume 1, Vanguard's Tale. Another game that looked promising but ended up cancelled was Chronicles of Eden Volume 1. It was announced in 2004 to be in development for the Game Boy Advance as a top-down, story-driven action-adventure RPG, but they didn't mention the publisher or the release date. Sounds kind of fake. When years passed by and things became quiet, people assumed the game was cancelled due to troubles finding a publisher. It's a real shame because the game looked amazing. Shining Star. Speaking of canceled Game Boy Advance games, Shining Star was one of them. It was supposed to be a military strategy game, and judging by the screenshots, the game looked like a love child of Advance Wars and Metal Slug. Some levels would be shoot-'em-up style, while others would be more strategy-based. That being said, while some sprites did look a bit odd, the game doesn't look half bad. Sadly, developer eWorks Studios couldn't find a publisher, so Shining Star was scrapped. Cairo, King of Pirates. Japanese video game producer Keiji Inafune has developed a reputation for cancellations and shortcomings, and Cairo, King of Pirates is no exception. The game was announced for the 3DS in 2011, and it looks really sharp. The graphics are solid and the cutscenes are animated quite well. We would have picked this game up for sure. The game was planned to be a strong new IP, and the first installment of a trilogy with gameplay similar to Dynasty Warriors. Everything seemed peachy until Marvelous, the publisher of the game, announced they lost $3.8 million producing the game, so they decided it was best to give up on its development. Probably a good idea. Conkers Bad Fur Day 2. Conkers Bad Fur Day was one of the most entertaining and original games released for the Nintendo 64. It was funny, surprisingly mature, and a huge success for Nintendo. After the first game was published in 2001, Rare quickly began working on a sequel to be released for the GameCube. But you know how this story goes. Spoiler alert! Not only did Microsoft purchasing Rare in 2002 cancel Donkey Kong Racing, it even canceled Conkers Bad Fur Day 2, also known as Other Bad Day. Sadly, Microsoft wasn't interested in a sequel and decided to remaster the original instead. So in 2005, we got Conker Live and Reloaded for the Xbox because it was less expensive than making a full sequel. Well, that is pretty lame. Well, there you have it. We really wish some of these games would have made it to store shelves. What canceled Nintendo games are you annoyed you'll never get to play? Are there any canceled Nintendo games we may have missed? Let us know in the comments section below. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to TheGamer to keep up to date with all things gaming. Thanks for watching.